Consult, orchestrating technology to move business forward.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to an episode of NT Talks. We're joined today by Rutger van Faassen of Pismo. Pismo is a global leader in modernizing the core banking systems, financial infrastructure. Welcome, Rutger. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of you and Pismo and what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you, Ron, for having me on. It's a great honor to be here. Yeah, a little bit about me. So I usually tell people my career has been sort of one long bridge between traditional and next generation banking. I grew up professionally in environments where banking was still very much defined by branches, by batch processing, and by big monolithic systems humming away somewhere in the basement. Over time, I moved into more of a strategic role, and there I got a front row seat to the widening gap between what customers were expecting and what banks were able to deliver. And what eventually pulled me into strategic partnerships was the realization that transformation doesn't happen because a new system is installed. It happens because someone builds the right alliances, the right mindset, and the right narrative. And so Pismo provides a perfect platform for that. It's the place where modern cloud-native tech meets the human side of change. And that's where I love to operate. And then Pismo being part of Visa, right? 100% owned by Visa. So it's the perfect combination to help clients break away from legacy constraints and to move into fast, scalable, always updated cloud infrastructure.
It seems that Pismo has been central to that, certainly beginning in LATAM and now in North America, Europe, and beyond, of moving from that traditional branch structure to the online, which really is just related to how quickly can things change and how many different types of people in different environments can the banks serve. And it seems like Pismo is pretty critical to that process.
Yeah, so we're pretty critical to sort of modernization, right? And helping with modernization. Now, if you would have asked anyone about modernization about 10 years ago, they probably would have said, well, that's a strategic project. I would say today, modernization is a survival strategy. Like customer expectation has really shifted from digital is nice to digital is the only acceptable experience. Payment volumes have really exploded. Fraud is more sophisticated, and real time is no longer a luxury. It's really table stakes. So Pismo sits right at that intersection of cloud native, event driven, core banking and payments, and it's really built for real-time global scale financial services.
Yeah, the entire newer generations have grown up with that so native to their existence, right? That in banking, I don't want to say they've caught up, they're catching up and moving quickly too. And Pismo, again, offers that. So why do you think banks still, even in today's age, are still postponing the core system modernization, or maybe just reluctant to move or not able? What's sort of slowing them down? What's speeding them up?
Yeah. So if you've ever been inside a large bank, you know that modernization is the ultimate paradox, right? Everyone agrees that it needs to happen, but no one wants to be the first person to pull out that first brick from the Jenga tower. And there's a couple of things that are basically keeping them from doing that, right? First is probably sort of cost and complexity. It's core systems touch every part of the bank, and so almost like changing it feels like rewiring a plane while you're flying it. Obviously, banks are conservative, and there's sometimes a culture and fear of disruption, right? So legacy systems become the devil you know, and people worry about being the one who breaks something. And then maybe third is the fact that there is still a talent shortage for kind of the most modern tech. So engineers and product owners who really understand APIs and composable architecture and microservices, it's still a small group. Maybe in other industries, not so much, right? Like if you think about sort of media, that might be more common, but in financial service, that's still an issue. And the tragedy is that postponing modernization doesn't just freeze risk, it actually compounds it. So every year, the gap widens between what the customer is expecting and what the bank is actually able to deliver.
Those banks that are adapting a little bit sooner, that gap becomes bigger, right? Because they're advancing and capturing people who may or may not turn back to the older institutions or to the more traditional. How does Pismo sort of position itself as a foundational kind of tech layer for financial institutions?
Yeah, so we don't actually ask the bank to rip and replace. We actually give them modular a cloud native platform that actually you can adopt in phases, right? So our platform supports cards issuance, core banking, digital accounts, lending, and more, and all API first, all microservices. And so it can be used in batches. So you can prioritize the relevant parts of the operation without having a major impact to the rest of the business. But you can bring faster change and better customer experience. So banks that use Pismo actually decouple innovation from their legacy constraints. And really that layer brings the real-time capability and the global scalability.
Are you finding that some of the banks do begin with that modular approach? Let's take a virtual card. Let's take another example.
Yeah, that's usually where people start, right? They actually do pick the part where the pain is the largest and sort of say, hey, let's fix that first. Let's not do big bang. Let's not do everything all at once.
And sort of in the beginning, rather, Pismo was really related more to the neobanks, the digital banks doing the most advanced, or not advanced, but the newest forms of technology. And they were ready, right? And it was easier because they were starting. How is that shift going? Are you going from the digital and the neos and now more to even the credit unions or traditionals?
Yeah. So if we look at what kind of like the neobanks are doing right, the neobanks were born in the cloud, just like Pismo was, right? So they didn't inherit 40 years of old systems or siloed organizations. So that gives them a couple of advantages, right? It gives them speed. They can ship features like weekly, not yearly. It gives them real-time everything, right? Balances, alerts, fraud checks. It creates simplicity where product sets are powered by modular tech, and it gives them a lower cost to operate because they're cloud native. Now, that said, banks have other things that neobanks don't have, right? They have scale, they have trust, they have existing customers, and they have regulatory expertise, which sometimes that's new for neobanks. So when you combine those things that traditional banks have with a modern cloud-native platform, that could actually tilt the playing field into their favor.
Sounds great. Do you have a few maybe examples or real cases of how Pismo has helped institutions modernize?
Yes. Yeah. So
and compete?
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of examples. So without naming specific institutions, like we worked with a global bank that migrated corporate transaction processing to Pismo to eliminate batch cycles. And it provided real-time visibility across different countries that they operated in. Another case is where a digital bank used Pismo to launch a new card product. And that was actually done in a fraction of the time that you usually take, right? Usually those projects are like 12 to 18 months. This was literally done in a matter of weeks.
Because you have the modular back office, if you will, all set up and ready to go.
That's right. Yeah, you have everything already. We have the APIs and the endpoints already ready. So that makes it really easy to then configure the setup, and then it can be done in weeks because that is all already preset. Maybe one other one that I'll mention is sort of a larger issuer that we worked with. They reduced fraud losses by leveraging real-time events to trigger fraud decisioning before authorization, not after. That was also quite powerful.
Sounds good. And what would you say? So, I mean, obviously there's cost savings and things, but what are the main advantages of having that modern core banking system built on the cloud and APIs?
Yeah. Well, the main advantages are that it is real-time ledgering and events, right? So it actually happens in real time. It's also always on. So there's no maintenance windows where it sort of says, hey, for these 3, 4, 10 hours, we're down. We're basically always on, and we do continuous updates, multiple updates a day. The platform also creates elastic scalability. So if you have peak volume, so think about like, I don't know, payday or on a Black Friday when lots of people are shopping, you can actually easily scale up the capacity. It's global ready from day one. It allows for rapid product iteration, and it creates lower infrastructure and operational costs. So it's not just about being modern, it's about being able to respond to market conditions like instantly.
Excellent. And again, we've already talked about some real world institutional examples and things you've done, but how about another practical use case maybe made possible, a little bit more detail perhaps, a virtual card, things that people use regularly.
Right. Yeah. So an instant virtual card that's a good example. So traditionally, if a customer applies for a card, it takes days, if not weeks, to show up in the mail. Right. So you do the application and then you wait. With the Pismo platform, banks can issue virtual cards instantly, and then they can provision them to their mobile wallet, which then allows the customer to spend within minutes. So that really takes the experience from being a wait and see and maybe in a couple of days, couple of weeks. It actually sort of creates an experience where it's in the moment. Customer delight, they can immediately use the card. And that's originally what they came for, right? They weren't there to sort of say, oh, no, I want to spend in a couple of weeks. I want to spend now. So that's I think, an example of where the platform really sort of helps. Maybe another example is kind of like what we call the product configurator, right? The part where people can actually set up particular programs. In traditional legacy systems, we actually had one customer that wanted to sort of set up niche card programs for specific customer segments. That would take months of coding. In the Pismo platform configuration, using rules and APIs, it can be done much faster.
And from the customer perspective, this is then obviously that much more available, that much quicker, that much easier to use.
Yes. Yeah. It's literally sort of rule based. We already have many of the APIs set up, and then you can sort of say, hey, instead of, in a lot of cases in legacy systems, it would be, we take one and then we copy it over and then we need to make changes and then we need to check that. By doing that sort of configuration, you really speed up that process. Maybe one other example for this is kind of like what we see with corporate treasury teams. They often struggle to get like real accurate cash positions across markets. Our event-driven architecture really streamlines that data, and it enables them to have sort of real-time dashboards. So instead of it being sort of a next-day report, they can actually see what's happening in real time.
And then I think two final questions might be one, what do you still see on the horizon, or what do we watch closely for in 2026 as far as digital finance? And then second question behind that would be, where is Pismo going? What's sort of the next steps for Pismo, particularly in North America?
Yes. Well, so let's start with things to watch for. So let's look out into 2026. I think I see like three big trends to look for. The first one I'll call sort of real-time everything. So batch processing is dying, right? Like people realize they need to get off COBOL systems that just do everything in batch. Real-time is really becoming table stakes for all financial products, but especially for the modern ones, right? If you think about stablecoins are on the blockchain 24/7, 365. No office hours, no downtime. It just happens when it happens in real time. So real time everything is going to be really critical.
That's something the consumer is expecting and they're accustomed to now.
That's it. And once it shifts, the genie doesn't go back into the bottle, right? People now expect things to happen in real time, where sometimes they even like, well, why did it take so long in the past? But once you offer it to them, you can't sort of say, no, we're going back to this old way of doing things. So real-time everything is really important. A second thing is probably what I'd call composable banking, right? Banks will increasingly assemble things like Lego bricks instead of these monolithic systems. It's much more sort of like building different pieces and different sort of microservices on top of each other instead of just building this big Jenga tower, because then it gets really scary. If you want to change the Jenga tower and you pull out a brick, it might actually fall over. And then maybe third trend is what I would call fraud as a first-class product. So if you think about it, everything is now sort of AI-driven. And so if you use AI to do proactive fraud mitigation, that can really become a competitive differentiator. Not just a typical risk infrastructure tool, but something that people actually sort of say, hey, if you can keep me safe and you can keep me safe from fraud, that is something that I'm interested in, and that will really set you apart from your competitors.
Those all make sense, and those seem to be critical to the consumer and to the bank, right? Both to the institution and to the individual using it. And as far as then the second question, Pismo and North America, now part of Visa, how do you see that?
Yes, yeah. So we're here. We're part of Visa. We are in the U.S. market. We already have a client. Some others are probably coming swiftly after this. this is happening. I would almost sort of say what people really need to sort of start thinking in a more modern way, right? They really need to think about modernization. And so I don't know, if I had one thing I could say to tech leaders and financial decision makers, it would be kind of like modernization isn't a project, it's a mindset. And the banks that will win are the ones that treat change as continuous and not as episodic. You don't have to rip out everything at once. I think that's old school thinking. I think it's much more about start where the customer really feels the pain. And that could be in payments, it could be in cards, it could be in onboarding. Wherever the customer feels the most pain, that's probably where you want to start, right? And then the Pismo platform really helps you make that journey possible in a controlled, low-risk way. And then, of course, I think what is important as well is that you have the right partners. So we're really grateful for the partnership with NT Consult. Transformation like these really require that. Great technology, but also the right people. So that those two are better together.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for your time. And we at NT Consult, of course, look forward to helping with the implementations and working alongside Pismo, Visa, and financial services are certainly, obviously, your area of strength and one of ours as well. So really appreciate your time, Rutger. Anything else you'd like to say finally?
No, I think that's probably it. Where you really need to think about that as modernization being a project, not being a project, being a mindset, right? You really need that. That's important. It's kind of like, because people look up to it and they sort of say, oh, I don't want to start this. I think it is important that you constantly modernize and that you really, really keep that going on a continuous basis. So thank you very much for having me on the podcast.
Our pleasure, and thank you for joining us.
NT Consult. Great people coding the future.